God is with me. That's his greatest promise, isn't he? Isn't it?
Uh-huh.
That God says, I will be with you. And that if he's with us, to also then be able to know he is with my child. I may not see my kid on the backside of the moon, but I can smile to think and say, but Jesus is with my child on the backside of the moon. That's his promise.
Welcome, everyone, to Breaking Bread, the podcast brought to you by Apostolic Christian Counseling and Family Services. Excellent, as always, to have you along. Craig Stickling is with me. Good to see you, Craig.
Glad to be here, Matt.
Warning here, I'm going to flatter you, but I feel like, Craig, you do really well in this parenting space. And I feel like today's topic has the opportunity to kind of showcase that. And I'm excited about that. And I know that. I know that because my intersection with you is on the parenting front.
Yeah.
Both as a both as a coworker as well as a user.
By the grace of God, and believe half of what you hear, Matt.
Well, the proof is in the pudding, and so I've seen enough of the work that you do, Craig. You've made a career out of working with kids, both in the public school setting and now, but very, very much working with parents and kids. And this area of parenting it's super sacred space, right? Mm-hmm. It's not uncommon for us parents to, freak out. Mm-hmm. We need a steady hand, and you've provided that for so many people and some perspective. Mm-hmm. So anyway, today's topic, parenting kids around the backside of the moon.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
That's going to be our topic, which we're playing a little bit to an Artemis II theme here. For any geeks out there who was paying attention in April. Did you pay attention to that at all?
Oh, not as much as my wife, but I loved the reminder of that story, Matt.
Yeah.
And it brought back some good lessons that I was able to hear and make this connection, which is just such a fascinating analogy to consider in our parenting realm.
Yeah, I love it. So for those who were not, maybe didn't trip your fancy. The Artemis was a NASA mission to send 4 astronauts around the backside of the moon and then back home again.
Right.
In further preparation for a moon landing, very similar to the Apollo 8 mission when they did something very similar.
Yes.
But basically, these 4 astronauts just get, slung out in space, right? And they travel around the backside of the moon, which is a really sacred time, a very intensive moment, the backside of the moon, for a lot of reasons.
Right.
And then for that hopeful return, I was pretty enthralled by the whole thing and did find myself kind of watching the whole thing unfold, which was really fun.
Yeah. And it brings in that great picture of Houston or mission control, right? Because you have a mission control and you have a goal, you have a desire, you know what the mission is, you know what the purpose is, and you know who's going out. And you care about those people who are going out. Yeah. But you also know there's this moment that they're going to go around to the backside of the moon, and we lose communication, we lose contact, we lose connection, we lose visual.
And we lose one more C. We lose one more C, Craig. Mission control loses control.
Yeah.
And that is the fascinating thing. And so let's make this connection to parenting, right? And really this metaphor that you use even with parents. I've heard you mentioned on the backside of the moon far before the Artemis mission. So this has been in your repertoire of models that you talk about when you're parenting kids and those kids go around the backside of the moon. Yeah. Lots of things can happen. But one of those, I would think, is you lose control and that helpless feeling, and that's where a lot of times parents are contacting you, right? And they're making connection. They're saying, Craig, I need some insight into this moment because it's very much out of control.
Yeah.
So paint a little bit that picture of family systems. What are we talking about? Take the analogy down to the practical family. Help us see and connect with, I understand that.
Right. And early, or at least initial analogies come up when something is amiss, something is not right with one of our kids, our natural relationships, connections, conversations, the give and take of chores and duties and conversation. There's a norm that operates within that, and our kids certainly have variations within that norm. But or sometimes I get a parent reaching out with a concern is all of a sudden my normal way of communicating, connecting with my child is no longer working. They go into this silence mode. I don't feel like I'm reaching them. They're not connecting back to me. What I'm saying doesn't seem to be getting through. In fact, it even seems to make things worse. Like you said, I've
Mhm.
lost a sense of control.
Yeah. There seems to be growing distance. And that's kind of where the panic sets in, right? This feeling that there is I am losing them.
Yeah,
And sometimes we use that phrase,
yeah,
I'm losing them.
yeah.
It's
Are
so
we?
hard.
Are we?
Yeah.
That's the
Yeah, yeah.
question. And I ponder in that sense of especially in that early Apollo 8, that first Houston, right? When that just went around the backside, how many of them looked at each other and
Yeah.
said, "What have we done?
Yeah.
Will we ever get them back? Is this a big mistake? Did we do the right thing?
Yeah.
Did we prepare enough? Did we plan enough? Did we present enough in them that they'll be able to make that curve and come back around?" And now we wait in that sense.
Well, speak to that now. Speak to that to parents, because I think that is a huge open question. And if parents look to fault or error or regret and some of these types of things,
Yeah.
there's no end to the list that we can write to say, no,
Right.
I missed it in so many ways, and there they go.
Yeah.
I've lost them.
Yeah. Yeah.
How do you speak to parents in that?
I find a little bit of comfort to think of the first mom and dad in the world, right? Adam and Eve. And I think about the first mom and dad, they had absolutely no distractions, none of all those other things. And you know what? Their kids struggle. And so I remind myself that in a broken world, it's not that I'm not going to disappoint my kids.
Wow.
That's going to happen to some degree, but there's a built-in grace that God pours into kids and also pours into us as mom and dads to recognize that he knows that gap. He knows our strengths and weaknesses. He knows what we'll do well and pour in well. He knows the areas that we won't, but he also knows what our kids will need. And somehow, just like on that mission control, he somehow is able to provide for that, fill into that, Matt.
Man, my brain exploded when you said the first couple, the first parents, as well as so many of the parents throughout the scriptures. The story captured in so many family systems in the scriptures is brokenness, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Craig, one of the qualities that you possess, I think, in your interaction, both with parents and with kids, has been an element of hope. And I can sense this as very germane to the way you think about life, the way you think about the parenting experience, the way you think about the maturation of a child. I want you to speak to that hope, because hope is what's at crisis
Mm-hmm.
when a parent feels like they're emotionally losing their
Mm-hmm.
child. Can you tease that out a little bit? What are you thinking about? What are you looking towards? How do you frame hope in this moment?
Right, right. And I'll take that one step farther. Is hope my child establishing or being able to accomplish this set of standards or expectations that I have for them? Is that where my hope resides? Or am I able to reframe that a bit and acknowledge that there's a release piece in that? That, oh, I can have expectations and that's a good thing. Yet also, is my hope even more rooted in who do they become in Christ? And do they become who God has created them to be? Even if that's different, a little bit different than my expectations.
Sometimes we're looking at the wrong thing as parents. Is that a good
Mm,
way to say it?
yeah, I look at it as I might just overfixate on one chapter,
Mhm.
and the whole book yet is still there. And there's yet chapters to be written yet in my child's life. And right now I'm just stuck on chapter 6, and I
And some
just cannot get past
and
that.
sometimes we wanna write chapter 12 when we're only on 6 as parents.
Yeah.
That makes sense to me.
And so the hope piece in that, Matt, is struggles, challenges, difficulties, that doesn't mean that we're not still on schedule doesn't mean that I'm off the mission or that we've somehow been lost out in orbit and we've lost the whole thing. The struggles and challenges don't mean that we've lost that hope.
Are we measuring the right things? For example, to your point, if I'm measuring the struggles and the problems, you are helping us see that there might be more to measure. What would be some of those things we should measure?
Growth, I think, is important to remember that they are growing and that their learning curves might look different than mine. So growth in that sense. Where are they at with their ability to use the talents that they have? I may not agree and I may not like what
Mhm.
they do, but are they using or trying to craft, explore, discover some of those things that they are or that they think they're good at, right? I may be like, I could care less if you are good
Yeah,
at skateboarding or
yeah.
whatever you would use. But if that's something that they're really kind of latched onto, then I'm able to say, okay, am I seeing their growth and energy and effort into that? So that's a piece of realigning a little bit of a total outcome to where they at and just getting by at for the season that they're in right now.
Mm. Well, and going back to our metaphor, then this idea of an orbit to come back, you really have a more holistic view of the trajectory of the child than just a straight line, forever growing distance. Which, that's what parents often think, though. I mean, it's kind of we go to the worst case scenario, right?
Yeah.
It's a forever extending straight
Yeah.
line, increasingly distant, but you see a potential arc.
Yeah. Right. And that's really modeled nicely kind of in some of the parenting seasons that we've talked about before, Matt, of, when our kids are just born, we are just we are their servant. We're keeping them alive, we're feeding them and changing. There's so much of that. And the next season is kind of the discipline, instructional stage. We're pouring a lot of boundaries and limits and that into their lives. And then we move into the mentoring a little bit. Okay, I've poured into you here pretty heavily, 10, 12 years. And now I get to step back a little bit and see what did you get out of what we've poured in, mom and dad have poured in. And so you get to a little mentor that direction a little bit. And then the biggest arc, that coming back around the backside of the moon, the biggest stage, the biggest season we will have with our kids will be that friendship stage. I don't have to be their servant. I don't have to be always correcting, challenging, instructing them. I even get to step back from mentoring. Now we get to be into that season. After that, come back around the moon piece and they start to come back close into where we're at in our solar system.
I mean, I think that come around thing, that was one of the most exciting parts of watching the whole Artemis mission is them re-entering,
Yeah.
right? It just seems like the expectation was there, almost the bewilderment, almost the surprise that it was actually going to happen.
Yeah.
And indeed it did, which was great to watch. What is your advice then for a parent's posture when they are on the backside of the moon and communication is cut off with that larger orbital,
Mm,
hopeful
right. Right.
perspective? Here's what you can do because you can't do much.
Yeah. There's certainly this pull to isolation and like you're in a struggle with one of your kids and it seems like you look around and all the other families are either at church or your connections seem to be going really well. And so there's this isolation piece in that. And so where we could find community would be within our church family. How do we get to step into maybe that space for some of our families at church? And how can we do that? And how can we do that well? I think there's a beautiful place for us to be able to step into that.
I think you're right on. In fact, it's been my experience. I could list names of people who have been my voice when it can't carry and has been my arms when
Mm,
I can't reach.
hmm.
And they have been found in a community, right?
Yeah.
And we see how important that is. Craig, I'm not sure there's a way to love another person and a parent more than loving them by loving their kids.
Mm, yeah, yeah. And a gift that flows within our church connections and networks and dynamics and that, which is beautiful to be able to have.
When you're having conversations with parents and children in this difficult place, parents feeling like they're losing their children
Hmm.
emotionally, and children like they're on the backside of the moon, what are some of the things you talk about? Uh, where are some of the places that hope is found?
I think it's important to remember that time and trust aren't necessarily always going to be moving at the same rate,
Mm,
and that what feels like a long time doesn't mean then that there's an erosion of trust, or that I can't trust, or that I can't trust the process. I can't trust them. I might even lose trust in God. So to recognize that time sometimes is going to be on its own with individual kids. The the advantage that Houston had with with their ships was that they had a pretty good idea of, okay, 30 minutes, 35 minutes, maybe a fewer for the
yeah.
Artemis, but the the story of the prodigal son, and the dad had no understanding of how long his son was going to be on the backside of the moon.
Help me understand a little bit with that time element. We need to be pretty open-handed with time. How should we handle the time element? Because that is a big thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Would you say that parents too often have their own timetable and that is not helpful always?
I think we have a very small button that says rest and trust, and a really big button that says panic and overwhelm. And that's the easy button to hit.
Yeah.
And naturally so, right? It's our child. It's a person that we've loved and poured into, and we've prayed and asked God for direction and help. And all of a sudden, those things aren't so visible right now. And how to be able to trust that God is with me. That's his greatest promise, isn't he? Isn't it?
Uh-huh.
That God says, I will be with you. And that if he's with us, to also then be able to know he is with my child.
Mm.
And I will trust that. I may not see my kid on the backside of the moon, but I can smile to think and say, but Jesus is with my child on the backside of the moon. That's his promise.
Yeah. Well, I that is a beautiful thing when you sense the grace of God in places that you cannot go with your kids,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, this father, me, can't get there,
Right.
but that father is there, which is really, really, really beautiful.
And over years, having different experiences with students of the past years, and then come back, and sometimes you do the random run into an ex student or old
Yeah.
student. I have very few students who come back to me and go, "Wow, you saw me at my best. That was the highlight of my life was
Yeah.
seventh and eighth grade."
I'm glad that you saw that.
Yes,
Yeah.
most of them say, "Oh, those were years that were just like really, really hard," and they kind of shake their head and they're like, "I'm sorry," or I didn't stay stuck like that. And so it's neat to hear, even in their perspectives, when they look back on where they were at, to know that it felt lost, and it feels lost to them as they're also in that sense of uncertainty where they're at in their life too.
I think there's something really helpful there too, Craig. And that is seeing a more expansive view of my child. And that is to see a mature adult that's going to process this moment in a future place
Hmm.
with the ability to reflect
Hmm.
and the ability to see themselves.
Hmm.
And sometimes life forces that exposure of ourselves,
Right.
right?
Yeah. And really, in God's great design, most most kids, they don't like being on the backside of the moon. They don't like being disconnected. There's a piece of them that may want the independence rush, but most of them are really yearning to have a home base. They're really yearning to have a mission control. Where can I always go? Where can I always feel connected? Where can I always know that I'll be loved and cared for in this place? And to be able to have that really speaks to them.
Using that metaphor of Artemis, we would say gravity for sure is
Hmm.
that connective thing. I mean,
Hmm.
they were not going to go forever in a straight line because they were going to be pulled in by gravity.
Hmm.
And so I think you spoke again of a very hopeful reality that there can be a connective gravitational pull that very often we see win the day. What would you spell it out for us then, Craig? What is that connective attachment
Mm.
type of what are those elements? How do I, as a parent, prepare for reentry?
Mm. Certainly, the mission control did not shut down when the
When they went out
spaceship
of
went,
sight.
went outside. They just
Yeah.
said, okay, we're all
Shut
going
out the
home.
lights.
We're done. They stayed very much engaged to what their purpose, what their mission was, what they had available to them at the time.
They
They
stayed home.
they stayed home. They stayed faithful to that. And so to be able to stay faithful in your love for your child, and so you minimize some of those things that are out of your control, and I say, okay, so what do I know? What am I able to do? And so we step into those things. Okay, this is what I do remember. This is
Mhm.
what I do know about my child. This is what I do love about who they are and who God has created them to be, right? And then we get to be those that bearer of their lives in prayer.
Mm.
And I think that is a beautiful piece that we get to do is hold on to those things in prayer and not just we can do the Lord, please help prayer,
Mhm.
but also to do the reflective prayer of gratefulness
Mm.
for who they are and the hope that lies within each and every soul. And we pray into that hope. We pray a blessing into that hope.
Mm.
Not just always the negative and always the how come they and why can't they,
Mhm.
but to be able to pray a blessing and that encouragement of the someday that they can be. And that we have that. We hold on to that.
Mm.
And we get to pray into that. And we get to encourage them and remind them of that.
What are some of the things that we can do to remind our kids? What would be some of those elements that make for a healthy gravitational pull home?
There's a great anchor in Philippians 4 that talks about, oh, whatsoever things
Yeah.
are
Yeah.
lovely, good,
Yeah.
true, good report, those beautiful things. We make that mental list of this is what I believe, this is what I know about who God has created our child to be. These are the strengths that I see in them. And I get to be carriers of the blueprint
Mm.
of what God can do with them someday. And I hold on to that hope. And I encourage them that I see the blueprint of what God can do in their life someday.
Mm.
And to be willing to be an encourager to them. Right now we're in a really lousy place.
Mhm.
This is really hard. Oh, but I still believe in the blueprint.
Mm.
And I believe that God's blueprint is still true for you.
I like that. I like that. Really grounding yourselves. We talk about consistency, constancy, grounding ourselves in those truths. Craig, what advice would you have for parents who have a fair bit regret and apology might be appropriate,
Yeah.
and yet maybe not?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
None of us do it perfectly.
Yeah.
And how do you comb over everything that we should apologize for, you
Oh,
know? So,
yeah.
would love your thoughts about, like, how should we think through that?
Well, I'll share just a thought or two, Matt, on what I have heard from kids who have grown up and reflected on that question. They know that their mom and dad isn't perfect. They know that. But something that frustrates them is when mom or dad don't acknowledge that they weren't perfect. They appreciate that genuineness to know that, you know what, we weren't perfect. Mom and dad weren't perfect. We know we did mistakes. We know there were things that we should have done different. We did the best that we could with what we knew at the time, but certainly we could have done better. And so I think for them to be able to hear that is settling to them. And it's also modeling to them that I don't have to have it all figured out. I don't always have to think I have to do everything perfect because, well, then we wouldn't do much of anything. And maybe there were specific events or specific things that you step into or you get intentional with. I think one of the best things we're able to do, especially when there's some maturity involved, is to ask our kid, what could I have done different? What place would that be? They
Mhm.
might remember some things. It's interesting. Some are very specific. It was eighth grade dance and
Yeah,
you did not. And that
yeah,
just always,
yeah,
and others are like, oh, I don't know. It just always seemed like you were on my case about something,
yeah.
right? So it can be arranged in that. But to be willing to ask, be willing to seek that.
Now, one thing you mentioned in that is when there's some maturity there. So I even from that comment, I'm guessing that there's perhaps a time and place for this, and that time and place may or may not be now
Yeah,
because it may or may not be heard. Is
right,
that right?
right.
Or I'm curious in that maturity
Certainly,
comment.
certainly in that. And our kids will, as they grow, they will get to different seasons in their life that they'll be able to understand what we're talking about with a deeper degree of understanding. And that's a next maybe season or stage that you can step into that.
Mm. Healing and health and growth happen over time,
Right.
and on
Right.
different timetables. That maturity happens differently with all of our kids, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But it also, I think, gives us a really healthy perspective to see that repair happens on a lifetime timeline. Is that fair to say?
Fair to say. And even as we were reflecting on that word apology or how does that fit into this narrative, I think that's the, the analogy of there's ditches on both sides, right? There's that ditch of never acknowledging that I've done anything wrong and never acknowledging that you will need an apology. But there's also a ditch on the other side, and that's for parenting. Sometimes if we get stuck in the well, I was no good. I wasn't a good mom. I didn't do the things right enough. And so everything goes back to, I'm so sorry for letting you down. And I'm
Mhm.
such a disappointment to you. And I remember experience that we had, and it was a tough season, and one of our daughters had gone through a tough season, and our awareness of where we were at as parents was not where it should have been and could have been. And so we acknowledged that in hindsight and the awareness and, just certainly hurt our hearts and we wanted to apologize and we apologized for that. But whenever things would kind of get rough again, it's interesting. We went back to apologizing again.
Mhm.
And one time, my daughter just said, that's not helpful to me when you keep apologizing. That may help you, but it really doesn't do anything. It doesn't help me anymore."
Hmm.
And that was just an interesting insight. I was apologizing because it made me feel better. But I had to remember too that it had a moment of effectiveness for my child, but that she was asking us to move on. She understood it, she got it, but now she was ready to move on because that wasn't helping her.
That's really interesting. That's really interesting. Craig, we find a degree of comfort
Mm.
in that God understands exactly what having children around the backside of the moon is like.
I think he does, Matt, probably more than we realize.
Yeah,
We're all on the backside at some point.
yeah. Craig, thanks. As always, really appreciate your insights, your experience, but your insights into parenting kids in the backside of the moon. It's fun to hit on this Artemis
Yes,
theme as we
yes,
as we just saw this in real
yeah.
life and can connect it to our life. Bless you. Thank you each one for listening. We have profound respect, parents out there who are doing what they can,
Amen.
doing the best they can, making mistakes and knowing it, and trying to recover from those. But we trust our kids into God's hands. Thanks.